Okay, for Epicurus, this question, the fundamental nature of the gods is, I could actually use this one to figure out who read it. What's the answer? Yeah, freedom from trouble, by which Epicurus understands they don't hurt physically, and they don't feel that kind of tumult intellectually or emotionally that humans feel. Epicurus' most basic concern for people is how they may be, you're clever, at least in the ancient Western tradition. These two things follow like clockwork. The qualities they attribute to the gods are the highest qualities, and therefore what they regard as the highest qualities, and therefore what humans should aspire to are those same qualities. Epicurus opposes pleasures when, again, this is logical, right? If you think about it, this is what makes sense. If the idea is to be happy in the sense of not troubled, then pleasures are good unless they cause you trouble, right? Physics and science are important to Epicurus in order to, fear of gods, fear of death, these are things that are real important to Epicurus because, he thinks they're absurd. Why does he say we shouldn't be afraid of death?
Because he says that upon death you cease to exist, and therefore you don't have any fears.
That's a primal fear, right? And if you think about it, it doesn't make any sense, right? Because if you, in his system of things, only atoms and space to put them in are real. And so once your atoms cease to function, it's like turning off the lights. He didn't know that metaphor, but he would have loved it. You are gone. Here's an Epicurean, this is from a later Epicurean, Lucretius, the Roman poet. How long weren't you alive before you were alive? How old do they say the universe is? So for 13.7 minus just a tiny bit billion years, you didn't exist. That must have been miserable, huh? So you can see how if you think about physics, you can sort of explode the notion of a fear. Ultimately, what you are is what you're made of. If you are made of atoms, and your atoms happen to be, for now, in a condition that allow for movement, rational thought, and so on and so forth. But that's a very transient condition. You'll only enjoy this for a few decades at most, and then it's over, so enjoy it while you can. So when looking at the parts and the whole, his intuition is always to explode any kind of high thought of something else by taking it down to its parts. Sex is fine because it's very pleasant. What's wrong with falling in love? She's so wonderful. There's no one like her, right? Is there anybody else like her? Let's get statistical here, right? This is the Epicurean view of things. When we fall in love, we get this image of some wonderful, more than human person. Only that's a lie, because she's just a human. Ultimately, she's atoms. Ultimately, you're atoms. Don't expect too much, but it can be fun. Rational thinking, our thinking processes work by atoms in a way that happens to be rational, so that rationality is a byproduct of atoms. Atoms are more fundamental than reason. And how about longing to be the most courageous person in your community, to be a real hero for your nation? By aspiring to something much higher, you can end up losing what you've got. And then you say, yeah, but I feel like I really should be a hero. And he'd say, what do you mean you should? Where does should come from? There is nothing out there that demands of you that you be more than you are, that you go through pain and trouble to be better than you are. Back then as well, there were people who were ambitious in their city. The city depended upon people to have some ambition and desire for honor and things like that. And he and his followers tended to stay removed. In something like a commune, like a modern commune, we have communes around here, right, where people say, for various reasons, I don't want to participate in all this rigmarole of trying to get rich or trying to be important, right? My friends and I will have a simple life. You would actually have, all of us, I think, would have liked and respected the Epicureans as good, decent people. Now let's move on to the Stoics. You know, we read through some Plato. Plato was the first half of the 4th century BC. And then at the end of the 4th century BC, most people seem to have become discontent with Plato and think, there's something about all this that just doesn't work. People became convinced that matter was real and had to be taken account of, whereas Plato tended to dismiss matter and say, oh, yeah, we got matter, right? But what really matters, what's really important are the ideas, right? So one way this emphasis on material developed was into Epicureans, and they put a certain spin on it. In opposition to this Epicurean way of life arose another group called the Stoics. And the Stoics hold to a radically different ethic and a radically different physics. In Stoic physics, the finest in the sense of littlest, tiniest particles, are actually conscious. The whole universe is an intelligent being. It's alive. The universe as a whole, in the sense that it works together, its parts do what it's like, sort of like our parts do. You know, I mean, my hand will go one way and my eye might turn another direction, but somehow it all works together. It's all connected somehow, and it has purpose, and it communicates with itself. The intellect, that is this thing that directs all the parts of the universe, they called the logos. You can see that it's related to our word logic, and it's present in everything, just as in some sense my intellect is present in my fingers. A human, they thought, is a logikon zoion, a logosish animal, so that we are like miniature universes. The universe is rational, and so are we. The logos, it's the thing that guides us, that leads us. So there is purpose in the universe, whether we understand it or not. The universe is doing something, and we should go along with it, thinking through what is right, and doing what's right, and acting in accordance with nature, as the Stoics would say, is ever so much more important than how we feel, whether it's pleasant or not. People whose lives are messed up are those that live contrary to nature. Living contrary to nature, for example, would be to say, I really want to get a lot of money because, why? Money has nothing to do with your nature. Strength, reason, goodness, those do. But the goal is to be what you should be, even if it happens to be painful, whereas the Epicureans see things a different way. What we're doing here is seeing two broad possibilities for how to understand how humans fit into what the universe is like and how humans fit into it. One is the starting point of just atoms, and from that comes reason and consciousness. The other way is the Stoic way, which is to say, prior to the matter is the rationality, the purpose, the idea. But in philosophy, these two basic notions of which comes first, does the matter produce the reason, or does the reason shape the matter? Those are two possibilities, and those are two long-standing possibilities, and there are very good arguments on either side. And I just wanted to put it to you that to the degree that you find yourself sort of feeling torn between these two broad models, it's nothing new.
If you had a universe that was purely material, does it make sense to think of things mattering to the universe having purposes and acting for the sake of it?
I think that's the struggle we're having right now. We're trying to figure out how the hell do you figure out if it is rational? Who's telling you that it's rational?
Yeah.
I mean, we assume that the religious text was either A, inspired by a divine God, or written by that God, or But that's an assumption. It's not necessarily, well, we were there when this person wrote it down, we saw God over their shoulder too. So even then, it's kind of like, well, yeah, I think so, but are we entirely sure? I mean, I think that's kind of how we've been kind of talking in circles.
Yeah.